What's up, Kookaburra crew? Today we're going to talk about how to lose all your friends with Fynn the Fangbearer. Stay tuned, we're going to dive into this nasty little commander and talk about how to do this budget brew and lose all your friends. Okay folks, let's dive into this deck. Let's look at our commander first. Good old Fynn the Fangbearer. He is a legendary 1/3 with deathtouch, but his second ability is what really sets him apart, right? He allows any creature that has deathtouch to basically get toxic too. This can be really frustrating for your opponents, but it's a lot of fun to build a deck that is under $50 that can dive into this and really do some great damage very quickly. And believe it or not, even though this deck is a tier 1 or a tier 2, because it doesn't have any of the major game changers in it, and it doesn't have any of the tutors, again, it's a budget deck, it really can be a lot of fun and stand its own against some much stronger decks. So before I dive into the mechanics of this deck, I just want to say stay tuned to the end of this video because I'm going to talk about some of the weaknesses of this deck and also some upgrades that you can put into it that will really help build it up, but it's probably going to put it past that dollar mark that we're trying to achieve with a budget build. Alright, so let's dive in. I do want to highlight that this deck is a full budget build. It is less than $50 on TCG Player. So that's pretty cool. You can get in this one pretty inexpensively and have some fun. Alright, so diving into the makeup of this deck, there is a lot of deathtouch creatures that we need to put into this deck. Fynn, as our guy that really empowers all of our deathtouch creatures, we need to make sure he's backed up by an entourage of deathtouch creatures. Lots of fun creatures in this, and most of them are relatively low cost. We try to go with fast, low cost creatures in this because we want to get them out there quickly and we want to start doing damage to rack up those toxic counters. Remember, even in a commander deck, even in a commander play, 10 poison counters takes out your opponent. So doing 40 damage is not near as important in this style of play as it is to get each opponent with 10 poison counters. And with Fynn, we only need 5 hits to get that with our deathtouch creatures. So we need a lot of deathtouch creatures backing him up. Alright, so on to instants and sorceries, or spells to keep us going. Some of these are for removal, like the ones that you can have a creature fight another creature. With deathtouch, that's awesome because anytime it does combat damage, that creature deals a fatal blow. So even with a small creature, you can do a fight against a larger creature and it could take it out because of its deathtouch capability. We also have some protection spells in here too to give some creatures hexproof or indestructible, right, for a short period of time. And then, of course, the ones that give our additional creatures that don't have deathtouch, so we can do a little bit more on the poison counter side. One additional spell that's really important is the ability to give our creatures trample. So giving our creatures trample, that means that if they get blocked and still pass through and do some damage to our opponents, they get poison counters. Again, we want to get our opponents 10 poison counters as fast as possible. We only have a couple enchantments in this deck, and then we do have our typical artifacts that you would see inside a commander deck. We do keep an arcane signet in there, and I know this is a mono green commander deck, but it never hurts to have an extra mana rock in there, right? We do put a basilisk collar in here as well to give deathtouch and lifelink to a creature that may not have deathtouch, and definitely the lifelink piece of information is really important. And then the flying and haste that we can get out of Cloak of the Bat, really helpful, really good to get that in there. And then one of the other key artifacts in this, and we'll see this also in some of our lands, is the ability to make a creature unblockable. Because if we can get a creature through that can't be blocked, either giving it non-basic land walk, or with Key to the City, you can get one target creature unblocked, that's really helpful. Again, getting those toxic counters to our opponents. We want to deal damage directly to them, not have them chump block with some creatures that are tokens that don't matter. We want to get the damage through to the actual opponent to get those poison counters on them. Our mana base for this deck is pretty basic. It's primarily basic lands, primarily basic forests. But we do put in a Rogue's Passage, an Escape Tunnel, and an Access Tunnel to try to make some unblockable things. Do throw an Evolving Wilds in there, that never hurts. Terramorphic Expanse never hurts. And of course a Command Tower in there, because it's a commander deck. So we put some basic commander items in there. And that pretty much rounds out the deck. So as far as strategies for this deck, one thing to keep in mind is Fynn the Fangbearer is a bit of a single point of failure for us. So if we don't draw Swiftfoot Boots very early on and give our guy hexproof, guess what? He's probably going to get removed. So we need to have an extra mana in here to be able to recast him, and we need to try to protect him as best that we possibly can with our instants and our sorceries. The other part of this that can get around hexproof, of course, is just general removal spells across the board. Board wipes can be the bane of your existence here. So one of the things that I do when I play this deck is I try to keep a couple creatures back in my hand, especially if I'm doing okay on the board and don't need to overload my board. I keep a couple creature spells back in my hand, so no matter what, if they do board wipe, sunfall everything gets exiled, I can actually cast these again and get them back out and rebuild my board very, very quickly. So I try to keep a couple back from a strategy perspective just to be prepared for when removal inevitably comes, because it will. Fynn, be expecting to cast him 2, 3, sometimes more times just to get him out there. So keep your mana available to pay that commander tax as much as you need to get him back out. He is required for this deck to be successful. Very rarely are you going to find a win without him on the battlefield. Because again, small creatures, toxic counters, that's really what we want. As far as upgrades go, with this deck, you could add a whole bunch of upgrades. You could add the tutors in there to be able to tutor up the cards that you need. You could put in more hexproof in there to protect more creatures, give them indestructible, things of that nature. Those are the types of upgrades that I would look into. Ways that you can really protect your board and give a little push for it as well. There's also some great, more high-end creatures that do have Death Touch that are in this green family. Again, they're not in here because it's a budget deck. So if you want to add those in there, add some more top-end, late-game stuff, and give you more of a win con that doesn't require just Fynn to be able to do toxic damage, that would be great. I think that's a great way to upgrade this deck and make it a little bit more impactful at the high end, I'll say, of the table. I think this deck is a lot of fun though. At $50, you really can't go wrong. Mono green has always been a fun way to play. Ever since I started playing back in the revised days, mono green was always a lot of fun. Big stompy creatures. This is also a pretty beginner friendly deck, so if you're new to Magic and you don't know all the mechanics of Magic, this is a great deck to get involved in because it's not super complicated. It's relatively straightforward. You're really relying on two key things. You're relying on poison counters and you're relying on Death Touch. Those are the key mechanics that you care about for this one. And it's creatures. Just putting out creatures and doing smash against your opponents as much as you possibly can. So I hope you guys get a chance to try it out. I put a link in the description for the entire complete deck list on Moxfield. So check it out, give me some feedback, let me know what you think, and subscribe for more content like this.